You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Welcome to the Capitalist Corner, folks. It is No-Gi Tuesday. I'm your host, Mark Pellegrino, and also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and vice chair, Mr. Michael Liebowitz, who's also helming this amazing station we call, not station, channel. Sorry, I always want to say
It's the
station.
channel. It's the channel.
Yeah, it's a channel. Amazing channel that we call The Rational Alternative. Michael's got lots of stuff going on. Michael, what do you want to tell us about what's happened on The Rational Alternative?
Well, I've still got the great episode out with the Scousins, Mark and Joanne, where we talked about the Liberty Movement, Freedom Fest, and ancillary topics. Great discussion. That's on the Michael Liebowitz show right now. This morning, I interviewed a world-renowned philosopher, on the history of the free will controversy. Very, very good discussion. I wasn't in that discussion looking for him to solve it or to give an argument for or against. I just wanted to cover the history so that I could present it to an audience. Great discussion. That should be out Thursday. And of course, we're here every day. This Saturday, however, there will be no Self-Made Soul on Mark's Patreon, nor will there be a Rational Alternative weekend because it is my Diana's birthday. So there's going to be a party. Aside from that, the super chats and super stickers, as you know, are always very much appreciated. Hello, Robert. Hello, Amy. Hello, Katrin.
Hello, everybody. Capitalist Corner fam. It's good to see you out there. Yeah, please do. If you can, be generous with your super stickers and super chats. It makes Mike happy, and we like Mike happy. When he's happy, he's not beating me up, and I like that. I like the days when I'm not beat up, Michael, because right after this, I go to jiu-jitsu, and I get beat up in jiu-jitsu. So I get it here, I get it there. Huh?
They kick your ass.
Yeah, so Michael might be coming out to California very soon, and I'm going to drag his ass into the mat, and I'm going to take him into the deep water and see what he's made of. I'm gonna get back at him for all the shit he gives me on this show.
Wouldn't I have to get some training first?
Well, what you could do is just do your best to submit me.
Right. Okay. So this is Mark's plan. Mark is a highly trained combat athlete. Oh, bullshit.
Look,
bullshit.
In jiu-jitsu, I'm like the worst blue belt there is.
Okay. All right. So Mark is a highly trained combat athlete who is probably 6 or 7 inches taller than I am, outweighs me by about 30 pounds.
How much do you weigh, Mike?
175.
Yeah, more than that. Yeah, I outweigh you
more than that. And he's all muscle. So he's like, oh, why don't we do this? Step in the ring. And you know what I would say? Why don't we do this?
Oh, that's bad. Look at that. The ex-felon pointing of his fingers like a gun.
I did.
Pellegrino.
I did once have a fight here. Christopher, I don't know, maybe I should, I don't know, whatever. Christopher Smith says he bites Mark. I once had a fight. A friend of my best friend at the time and I were highly intoxicated. So he was leaning on the car and I gently tapped the gas and bumped him lightly. And he smiled and laughed. And then a few minutes later, he was behind the wheel of the car and hit me doing, 10, 15 miles an hour. Oh. We were both hammered. There were girls there. So, of course, no one wants to back down. We end up arguing and, and nonetheless, I said, I'm not going to fight you in front of these girls. When we get home, we're going to have the fight. So we get to my house. I go to put up my hands. He grabs both my wrists so that I couldn't swing. And what I did was I pulled him toward me and I bit him numerous times. But the story gets interesting. It gets really interesting. So I'm really upset about this. I've just had a fight with my best friend, right? I've literally got his blood on my face, on my shirt. And we go to a local Dunkin' Donuts. Now I'm crying. I'm wicked upset. This woman comes out and she says to me, I'm a psychic and I can tell you're upset.
I love that.
And I'm like, really? What gave it away?
That's funny. Wow. So, Michael, we got some stuff to talk about here. Did you watch that whole interview with Jesse Waters and Abdul El-Sayed?
I did not. I read it and I read some more and I read some more
I
and I
watched
watched a
some of it,
little bit of
man.
it.
I watched some of it. It's insufferable. They're both insufferable human beings.
Oh, I could go for that. Yeah.
First of all, I think in Jesse Waters, Jesse Waters has very little in the way of brain power or brain cells operating. If you've ever watched his show, and it was on his stupidity and inability to take advantage of moments was on full display with El Sayed, who I thought came very well prepared for the individual that he was taking on. Of course, he really tried to turn the conversation around and put Jesse Waters on the defensive, and Jesse Waters simply did not know how to handle it. It was ugly all the way around, with the guy basically deflecting any question or any admission of his, former policy takes in there and trying to flip it around and pretend like his democratic socialist agenda is very much in line with quote unquote conservative Americans. And I'm making that distinction of conservative Americans from the MAGA movement, but I thought he tried to do a rather artful bit of political jujitsu on Jesse Waters, who's not hard to beat up on. But it was an ugly conversation. I mean, what do you have to say about this
All right. So
banner event in politics?
So I on the thumbnail I put a question mark after quasi-socialist because in many ways this Abdul Sayed, he's not part of the Democratic Socialists of America. So in many ways he wants to operate within the sort of social democracy framework, a highly regulated economy, large welfare state, but still to have the capitalist system there to bilk for everything it's worth. Right. He does, however, advocate for Medicare for all. So it's the universal health care stuff that we've talked about. Perhaps and this guy, by the way, this is not a dumb human being. Let's just put he's not dumb. I disagree with him, but he's a highly educated doctor. He's a Rhodes Scholar. I mean, this is not somebody that just is envious of his others, so decided to be a socialist. That's not what we're dealing with here. He advocates, though, for the public ownership, which of course ends up being government ownership, of artificial intelligence.
Yes,
50%
public share.
Yes, going even farther than Bernie. So whatever you may say about this guy, his other positions being social democracy, when it comes to healthcare and AI, he's full on socialist.
Yeah, but Michael,
what was so awful?
What was so ironic was that he was claiming when he was trying to turn the tables on Jesse, he's like, I just don't want doctors and patients to be interfered with in their relationships with each other. Are you for interfering in doctor-patient relationships? And Jesse never came back with, you're for socialized medicine. Of course you're for interfering between doctors and patients. That's what you're all about. And when he tried to pin him on the Green New Deal, the guy tried to turn it to the affordability crisis. I just want fuel and electricity to be affordable for people. Well, that's precisely what the Green New Deal doesn't do, is make electricity and power affordable to people.
He also, it comes with the standard billionaires don't need all their wealth. And billionaires aren't working for their money. They're using money to make money, which are just, whatever. That's just garbage. Of course, first of all, it's not your business or anybody else's business what a billionaire does with his money or who needs money or who doesn't. That's not your function in the United States system. But this idea that they're not working. First of all, if I right now, right. So if I decide I'm going to work 18 hours a day to build something, and then I build it so much that it kind of runs with my supervision, but I still don't have to put in all the effort, and I just take my money and invest and reinvest and reinvest. I've still worked for it. Just because I'm no longer working in the same way I used to, I'm still working for it. So he's wrong about that. Now you talk about the situation with the healthcare. Because if somebody were to say that to me, even with the trans issue, I largely want this issue to be decided by parents and doctors, not the government. Outside of, I don't think, for instance, that surgeries should be available to minors, because that is child abuse if you're doing that, right? But for the most part, I think that doctors and parents know more about a child's condition than Trump does, right? And they certainly have studied the issue of transgenderism more than I have. And in a free society, I would rather they make the decisions than me. So in that regard, he throws that out there kind of like a swerve, right? To deflect from it. Well, don't you want this? But the correct response is, the problem is, Jesse Waters can't really say this because it's not really true. See, in my view, I would say absolutely. I want doctors and parents to make their decisions. I want people and their doctors to make decisions. I don't want the government anywhere near that. The trouble is, and it ends up the same thing with education when it comes to conservatives, is they want big government. They just want big government to do something different. So Jesse Waters, Donald Trump are not going to call for the end of Medicare and Medicaid. They're not going to argue for a free market and education. They sure as hell don't want parents and doctors to make decisions in relations to the treatment of transgender kids. So they can't respond with that. So they end up stuck. I once interviewed the head of this organization. It's I think a national organization, but I interviewed the head of the Connecticut organization. They're called Moms for Liberty. And their big thing was they wanted certain topics not taught in school. You know, Larry has two daddies or whatever, that type of stuff, sexualization. And I said, okay, but you do want the government involved in education. Yes, the government should be involved. Okay, so really what you want is not liberty. You want the government to act on your behalf to implement what you want. I said, because you're saying you want parents to choose. I said, okay, what if a parent decides that math is not relevant? Oh, no, math is highly relevant. How about history? No, they have to have history. Okay, so it's not about parents choosing. It's about not having them choose what you don't want them to choose and having them choose what you want. But and she was in no position to argue against me. In this, it's similar with the Jesse Waters. How does he combat this guy when he says, I want parents, I want patients and doctors to make decisions? What does Jesse Waters say? Because he's going to be stuck.
And he was stuck, Michael. Yeah, and you get the sense that Trump wanted to abolish the Department of Education, not for the same reasons Reagan did, but as a simple attack against the left-wing establishment, not to privatize education because they respect individual rights and property and a parent's right to choose for their own child the type of education that they want to put their children in, not because of those reasons, which would be liberty-loving reasons, but just to score points against the left. And that's all Jesse tried to do, was score points on this guy. When the guy was... Michael, the guy is trying to posture as a kind of capitalist now. He's trying to position himself away from the DSA messaging, which he spent, so far, the pre-campaign and lead up to the primaries, positioning himself as a democratic socialist. But now he's trying to posture as if that those socialist ideas are in some respect compatible with capitalism. That's what kills me.
Yeah, and then they got into the whole Sharia law thing, which, let me just say, I think that people on the right have way, way, way overblown the risk of the United States being taken over by Muslims and having them implement Sharia law, right? I don't see that happening. But again, if you look at the exchange they had, Jesse Waters asked him about Sharia law, and he turns to Jesse Waters and says, well, what about canon law? Right? In other words, neither should be enforced. And he says, I'm not trying to force anybody, and neither should you. So then how do the conservatives argue when they want the Ten Commandments in schools and creationism taught alongside evolution? So again, it's not religious teaching or religious rules they're opposed to. It's specifically Muslim teaching and Muslim rules they're opposed to. So again, they end up lost. They have on the right, no philosophical basis to really combat this stuff. None at all. If that's me, I tell them, sure, you and your family inside your house want to practice your religion. That's up to you. That's fine. I do not care. That stuff cannot influence public policy at all. Complete separation of church and state. And I would say the same thing to Billy Graham Jr. or any of these other evangelicals. Jesse Waters won't, and that's why conservatives, at least it's one reason why conservatives end up very hopeless against this type of person.
Though, at least in Christianity, there is in Christ's own words a separation between church and state. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. In the Islamic, I'm not. But the Orthodox Christians, of course, like Orthodox religious folks everywhere, want to impose their orthodoxy on the rest of the world. Unfortunate, but certainly not necessarily in pure Christian canon. From my perspective, you could tell me if I'm wrong. Islam, however, is a political system. It is a political system in addition to a religious system. And look, when they take surveys of folks, at least in the UK, I don't know how it is here, but around a quarter of the Muslims out there, and remember, Muslims are 1 billion strong, a billion plus strong, around a quarter of them would like to see Sharia law implemented in the places where they live. That's an incredibly huge number of people. I mean, that's the population of the United States of America right there worldwide. And when you think about some of these Orthodox, hyper-conservative Orthodox Islamicists, essentially inhabiting places like Dearborn, Michigan, where they elect people in office, they elect these people to try to infuse some of their ideas into ours. It does justifiably, I think, give people the willies. I think you're right. It is overblown. I think there's enough of Americanism still alive in our culture that we reject the phenomenon of church and state in unity with each other. But the stronger these Republicans get and the more vocal they get and the more they start to dominate the culture, the less that concept, that American concept of separation of church and state has an impact, right? The more it's about the spoil system democracy where everybody's trying to force their rules on everybody else.
Okay. You said a lot. I don't want Muslims getting elected to office and trying to implement Sharia law, right? I don't want that. And if they're trying to do that, it needs to be opposed. That does not mean that we are on the cusp of a caliphate operating out of Washington, controlling all of us. Not even close. Not even close. You say that's a quarter of the Muslim, population wants Sharia law. I don't know what percentage of American Muslims want to see Sharia law implemented in America. That's the first thing. The second thing is in relation, and Greg Doherty's kind of hinting to this, where Jesus says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, think not of the way of this world. In one sense, I get what you're saying, that it would seem to countenance against government being religiously organized. But on the other hand, it's also about submission to government, that whatever the government says, we're supposed to do. And so that's a very dangerous.
Well, he certainly did it at the time, but he was trying to let the Roman authorities know that he was no actual threat to them because the Jews were in rebellion, active rebellion against the Roman Empire, and he was being watched by the authorities, and he wanted them to know that he was no overt threat.
You're going to get Jim Valliant all wound up here. I'm just telling you now. I'm putting it out there. See, I told you. And here he comes, nakedly pro-Roman. Jim is going to go sick. He is going to give Mark the equivalent of the theological jujitsu beatdown.
Why?
Have you seen? I've never read The Creating Christ, but I have watched the documentary, and I did interview Jim on the book. And basically,
But I just said he tried to distinguish himself from the zealots who were anti-Roman. He tried to make it very clear to the Roman authorities that he wasn't that guy.
But in Jim's view, he was basically a Roman agent.
Wow. Okay.
Right, Jim? Am I getting this wrong, Jim? Tell us. Was Christ a Roman agent?
Was he a plant? He was like a spy for the Romans, infiltrating Judea, Samaria for the Romans, for the imperial power.
Well, about control. Okay. Do you have anything else to say about this, Socialist? Or do you
And
want to
I
move
mean,
on?
I mean, Michael, all I saw was a stupid man trying to get score gotcha points on El-Sayed, and Said in a very studied manner attempting to turn the points on Waters, which was easy to do, Michael, because they both fundamentally agree about things, right? I mean,
Jim says that's bullshit. He was a rebel. So I don't know what Jim is. I don't know. I thought Jim is saying that Christ was a Roman agent, but maybe he's saying that's just a Roman.
I think.
Okay. Jim's argument. I don't know. I don't know what Jim's argument is anymore. It's very confusing. I haven't.
But
seen
I thought
anything in a long time.
Judas was a zealot. Judas assumed that the Messiah was going to be a warrior like David. He wanted Jesus to assume that mantle, which Jesus did not do. And that is one of the reasons he betrayed him to the Romans, because he didn't fulfill the zealots, which was to throw off the yoke of Roman imperialism. I could be wrong, though. It's been a long time since I've read the Bible.
It has, and Jim Valliant is a problem human being. I'm going to tell
Jesse
you what
Waters
do.
does look like a Ross from Friends. Thank you for that, Greg. He does.
No.
He does.
I am actually sending Jim Valliant, he's free to click this or not, a link, and he can come on and tell what exactly it is. I could swear that Jim Valliant's argument is that the idea of Jesus as the passive Messiah was a Roman creation, and that
no, it was a creation of Paul.
No, you're fucking it up, Mark.
What do you mean?
You're fucking up.
What are you talking about?
Because Jim, I'm telling you Jim's thesis, and you're coming in with your own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to get clear what Jim thinks.
Oh, okay. So
You
Jim
understand?
thinks. Wait, Jim thinks what?
Jim thinks that Jesus, the passive Christ, is a Roman creation.
Oh. Okay.
He may. I don't know. Jim. I sent you the link. If you want to come on and explain it, you can come on and explain it.
He says we're both fucked up.
No, I saw this documentary 3 years ago. I interviewed him on it. It's confusing as hell anyways. But,
he says you owe him a whole program now.
No, screw that. If he wants to hit that link, hit the link. I feel like Jim is bullying us at this point. And I think, quite frankly, Mark, you've taken us far astray from the scope of the discussion.
Well, yeah. Look, the point is, Abdul El-Sayed is a lying sack, and that's what he did on that show. Was he tried to just turn everything around? He deflected everything. He never copped to wanting the Green New Deal. He never copped to his Sharia law comments. He never copped to any of the comments that Jesse Waters accused him of. He instead just turned things around, as you can with current conservatives in the GOP, because they basically they're all buying the socialist narrative now, guys. It's just that the right can't admit it.
Want to see me get Jim's ire really up? Watch this. The bottom line, Mark, there's historians like Richard Carrier who are really making the case that Jesus never existed at all. So, I mean, I don't know if Jim wants to, so maybe Jim wants to come on and combat that idea. I don't know. I'm just saying that idea is out there. The idea, the mythicists, they're making the argument there was no Jesus. Jim seems to think they're wrong, but I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Paul was a Roman. Anyway, let's get to what happened.
Thank you, Greg. Anyway.
He's mad. Wow, he is really mad. To pop up like this?
I would not describe it as anger. Sadness.
Okay.
Are you disputing Richard Carrier?
Yes, and he is one scholar we take on in the text of our book. If y'all bother to read the book to figure out what
I've seen the documentary, Jim.
Oh yeah, okay.
I got a question, Jim.
The movie, okay.
Is it not you did interviews for it? Is it not your contention that the pacifist Jesus of the New Testament is a creation of the Roman Empire meant to suppress dissent?
It is well, in a way, That is exactly it. The original.
Well, then how did I fuck up?
You fucked up in several characterizations of it. At the beginning, you were totally fucked up. You finally come back around to something that is semi-like what I'm saying. And Mark has a great point about Paul. Paul is the beginning of Christian theology. If you say, where does Christianity as a religion come from? It's those darn letters of Paul. Right. Okay. Paul changed Jesus, began the process of changing the historical Jesus into something else. Now, in the book, we don't take a stand on whether there was a historical Jesus. My co-author tends to be a mythicist. I tend to be a historicist. I think it's much stronger with a historicist theme, our thesis in general. Jesus was a rebel. I mean, that's why Romans crucified people. And there's enough bleed through of rebel material, like Judas. There's enough bleed through that you can see that Jesus' original movement. In fact, in Paul's letters, there's plenty of bleed through when Paul's arguing with the original Jesus movement, say in Galatians. It's plain that Paul is turning this thing upside down, inside out, altogether. And so, yes, the gospel's presentation of Jesus, I think, is the exact opposite of what the historical Jesus really was all about.
Okay, let me clarify.
So did this gospel, this passive, hold on, did this passive Jesus come about through the Nicene, the Council of Nicaea, or what?
Long earlier.
Oh my God, he heard of the Council of Nicaea and he wanted to show his erudition. For heaven's sake.
Yeah,
erudition?
Look. One of the things that first struck me was that there was this giant Jewish war. In fact, there were several Jewish wars in the first and second centuries of the Common Era. A religious set of wars motivated by the messianic beliefs of the Jews at the time. And it is militant, Torah orthodox, exclusionary. Christianity is the X-ray opposite, the photographic negative opposite of that. It's pacifist, Torah critical. And so what happened is a rebel movement got turned into a pacifist movement at the very time when the Jewish temple was being reduced to the Wailing Wall it is today. I figured that was no coincidence. I figured this giant messianic religious war with the Jews and the Romans happening at the very moment when Christianity is emerging and being created was no accident. And that clearly whoever wrote, I don't believe, like some people who I may have inspired, believe that the Roman government itself wrote the Gospels. In creating Christ, we do not say any such thing. What we say is that they were written by sincere Christians for their communities, or maybe less than sincere Christians for their communities, long after the original idea of creating turning this religion, this messianic movement, into a pro-Roman phenomenon, which the New Testament clearly is. The New Testament is clearly an ideological response to the Jewish rebels of the first 2 centuries.
Okay, Jim, Mark sprang this conversation on me, so I apologize for getting the thesis wrong. Please allow me to redeem in a way. The basic thesis that you put forward is that the New Testament conception of a Messiah, not the historical Jesus, but the New Testament conception of a Messiah is Roman propaganda, in essence, right? And this was facilitated by the Jewish historian Josephus, who claimed it was actually a Roman that was the Messiah.
Well, Josephus, a Jewish turncoat during the First Rebellion, became the official propagandist for the imperial family. And he claimed that Vespasian was, in fact, the emperor who defeated the Jewish rebels, was, in fact, the fulfillment of messianic prophecy. And in order to do that, they had to create something like the equivalent of what you'll read in Mark 13, the famous Jesus prophecy about the destruction of Jerusalem. Most scholars use that in Mark 13 to date the Gospels as around or after 70. I think it was a bit after myself, but it had to be because it was a perfect description, and it follows Josephus's description, including the fulfillment of a messianic prophecy of armies fighting in the clouds, indicating that, in my view, the original form of, say, Mark 13, not Mark, the original form of Mark 13 was a kind of imperial propaganda. There's only one person that Jesus's prophecy could point to, Vespasian.
So I was right. You're looking at me like I'm crazy, but I was correct that you're saying it's Roman propaganda.
You were right at that point and crazy.
Right. I was wrong at the beginning when I said it was Jesus that was this way because I was misremembering. Mark had me all confused.
Jesus was not a Roman agent, which is what you began with, and I was just
That's what I said. I was wrong. The creation of Jesus was Roman propaganda. The New Testament depiction, I mean.
The New Testament depiction, precisely.
Yes. Thank you, Kathy Cassio. Mark, don't mess me up again like that. In front of my teacher, you made me look bad.
That's what I do.
Listen, let me tell you something. Jim is not feeling well. When Jim is not feeling well, you can never get him to come on. So we really must have pissed him off.
Jim, are you sick?
I have not been feeling lately, but I'm okay. I will be well.
Oh, well, thank you for coming on and setting the record straight about Jesus Christus.
Yes. I think for someone who all I did was watch a documentary a few years ago, I thought I did pretty damn well.
You did pretty damn well.
Thank you, Greg, for the super sticker.
Okay.
Thank you, Greg.
Meanwhile, Pellegrino's over here talking about the Council of Niche.
Council of Niche. You know.
No, the Council of Nicaea, which you'd want to distinguish, say, between Nice, France. I mean, the root is the same. It's the Greek word for victory. Nike, right? Right, Nike, right?
All right.
Anyway, look, scholars today are reaching the point that they realize that the Greek language literature that we have in the New Testament is basically composed by Roman elites in classic Greco-Roman literary form. It is not something that we would expect from the Jewish rebels. To the extent to which the Roman government was involved, I think during the early Flavian period they were, but we don't really have Christian documents at that point. They're just laying some groundwork. By the time the Flavians are gone, there's really no connection to the Roman government, and the Jesus movement is free floating, and that's when most of our Christian literature comes into being. But it's written for Romans. It's Roman cultural material, just like the epistles of Seneca or Cicero. Paul wrote literary epistles, just like the biographies of Plutarch or Suetonius. The Gospels are legendary biographies. They're classic literary genre of Roman elites, not Jewish rebels.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. All right, Jim. The book is right behind you, Creating Christ. We might as well give you the opportunity. Where can people buy it?
Amazon, of course. Amazon.com. If you're interested in the idea, we have some pages out there. We've got our website, www.creatingchrist.com. We've got the Creating Christ page on Facebook. We've got the Roman Provenance of Christianity page on Facebook, Roman Provenance of Christianity, because there's actually a growing number of related theories. This is the moment in history where this is being discovered. So there's a number of related theories that we like to explore, because the work of, say, Robin Faith Walsh or Dr. Dennis MacDonald are obviously very closely related to our own.
Oh no, obviously.
Wow, this Jesus story is so much more complicated than I knew.
Screw that guy. Okay, listen. Here's the thing. The ultimate question, Jim, is this: Mark referenced he in essence spilled the beans. He did to the audience that I might be coming out to California. He wants to have this. Yeah, he wants to have this role in the jiu-jitsu thing. And Jim, I'm counting on you as someone who lives a mere 3 hours away. If this happens, it's you and I in a handicap match against Mark.
I am happy to drive up to Valencia. Yeah, at least to witness this. I don't know.
What kind of shit is that? To witness it?
You don't want to see it.
Someone's got to.
Well, maybe you do. Maybe you do. You could document it.
Right?
Jim could be like my manager. You know how wrestlers have managers?
Yeah, see, I'll be Burgess Meredith to your Rocky.
No, Mr. Fuji to my Don Morocco, and you hit him over the head with the cane, and we're all good. All right, Jim. Hey, Jim, thank you so much for coming on. I love you, brother.
Thank you so much.
All right, now that you caused
we could have kept Jim on for the next segments too, but
I don't think Jim knows the net. I didn't send him the stuff this morning.
Okay, but they're very interesting, and I think he'd have a very interesting opinion about it. So I didn't know about this person, Michael, until you sent me this stuff this morning. This Karen Attiah, is that how you pronounce your name? Attiah?
Okay, you saw how I pronounced Nicaea a second ago. So who the hell knows how to pronounce her name?
You did that? You didn't do that on purpose?
No, I don't. I thought that's what it was. That's how I heard somebody pronounce it. No, I heard somebody call it the Council of Niche. That was like 30 years ago, and I just always thought that was what it was called.
I thought you were joking. So let's talk about this person for a while. Karen Attiah or Attiah. Somebody could correct my pronunciation.
It doesn't matter. Can we just get to the story?
I don't like mispronouncing people's names. Even if
I don't either. But what are we going to do? We're going to talk 20 minutes on how to pronounce her name.
Listen, she used to work for the Washington Post. She was one of the editors of their opinion and cultural page, something like that. And when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, she made a bunch of posts respecting
Gee, well,
his assassin.
you just
What?
you just jumped right through everything.
I jumped the shark?
Yes, in essence, but we're not desperate, so you don't need to. This is a renowned opinion piece writer. She worked for the Washington Post for 11 years. She was very prominent. I believe she's won awards. But when you read through what she's saying, it's clear to me, first of all, that she's borderline racist.
Not borderline racist.
Well, I don't want to push it. I don't want to
racist.
push it. But here's the thing. This is what happened now. This is what
Wait a minute. You don't want to push it. She just talked about how white men were obsessed with gun violence, and she wasn't going to mourn a white man. I mean, every
that's Codswallop. She didn't just say, I'm not going to mourn a white man.
She's not going to tear her clothes and shed tears and do performative mourning for a white man who advocated violence in his own right.
Yes, that's what she said.
Okay. So that's the full context. But the fact that she doesn't just say a man or a human being who does.
No, she throws in white man over and over and over.
Yeah, and that's clearly her thing. Her thing is racialism. That's her thing. It seems. And so
I'm not saying her comments are borderline racist, is what I'm saying.
They're also lies. She mischaracterized stuff that Charlie Kirk said. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. So she posts an abundance of things on social media.
Blue Sky.
So Blue Sky, yes, Splitters, Blue Sky. But there was a lot of them. But the main thing she posts, and she puts it in quotations. She says, Charlie Kirk said, black women do not have the brain processing power to be taken seriously. You have to go steal a white person's slot. Now, that's not actually what Charlie Kirk said. I think I have it over here, somewhere in here. What he actually said was, if it would have said 3 weeks ago that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know you do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. He's referring specifically to Joy Reid, Michelle Obama, Sheila Jackson Lee, and Ketanji Brown Jackson. He's not referring to black women as a whole. So she misquotes him blatantly. It's not even a close thing, but she says things like, I want to find what in her Substack, she says, I have been canceled by Columbia. I have now been canceled by the Washington Post. Institutions may cancel me, but my pen and my teaching will not be silenced. If anything, my voice will be sharper now. She then goes on to say, hold on, actually, she says it earlier. I was at the bottom. She says she was fired for speaking out against political violence, racial double standards, and America's apathy towards guns. She says that, hold on, I got to make sure that I find it. She says, on Blue Sky, in the aftermath of horrific shootings in Utah and Colorado, I condemned America's acceptance of political violence and criticized its ritualized responses. She then goes on to say, my most widely shared thread was not even about activist Charlie Kirk, who was horribly murdered, but about the political assassinations of Minnesota lawmaker Melissa Hortman. I want to make sure that I get this. She says, I did my journalistic duty, reminding people that despite President Trump's partisan rushes to judgment, no suspect or motive had been identified in the killing of Charlie Kirk. She then says, my only direct reference to Kirk was one post, his own words on record.
Okay. Lie.
So, see, Ian just did a swerve here that I don't like. Because Ian says, well, Charlie Kirk his quote is still appalling, even if she got it wrong. Okay, but that's fine, but I don't like yeah. And we did a whole show on here talking about Charlie Kirk. But right now we're talking about this woman who's claiming she got fired for telling the truth, which is not true. It's a lie. First of all, she repeatedly says things about white men this, white men that. Then she misquotes Charlie Kirk almost immediately after his assassination, then doesn't take responsibility for it. She says, no, I just repeated his words, which was not true.
It's a lie. It's a lie, Michael.
It's a blatant lie.
And maybe she has to misquote him and make him and make the pretense that he's generalizing about black women, because she generalizes about white men.
Yeah, she does, and I do disagree with his quote, but it's one of these things. Whenever I criticize Trump, and if I post something criticizing Trump, I inevitably get, what about Biden? What about Obama? Right? Who I also couldn't stand. Whenever I criticize Obama or Biden, I'm well, what about Trump? So in this case, we're talking about a woman who blatantly misquoted somebody, was fired by her employer, and is blaming it on the fact that she just told the truth. That's not true. That's the discussion. It's not about how bad Charlie Kirk was. I'm not a fan of Charlie Kirk. We did a whole show about him, but I don't know why that always occurs. That when you want to criticize somebody inevitably comes and says, well, what about this? This is about her and her behavior. Now, there's a collective bargaining agreement that she belongs to. Now, these collective bargaining agreements, ultimately, starting with the National Labor Relations Act, I think in the 30s, correct me if I'm wrong, mandating that employees have the right to unionize, and that and the companies are obliged to
arbitration
with them.
Right.
So they're in this arbitration that they had to go to, and the arbitration decided she wasn't fired justly, that they didn't actually have good reason to fire her, and they must give her their job back. So to me, when it really comes back to, it's not even about Charlie Kirk's appalling words, nor is it about her racism or her appalling words. It's about the right of an employer to fire employees, which in this case is being hindered by a union who's empowered by the government. That's where the real linchpin is for me, is the fact that the government can mandate that employees have the right to negotiate, and employees have the right to unionize, and then employers have to good faith negotiate with them. So they end up with this collective bargaining agreement that says that she can only be fired in steps. So who cares if she's out there as an employee of this newspaper misquoting people as a reporter, nonetheless, even if it's an opinion piece reporter, nonetheless, they can't fire her. To me, Mark, that's the big story here.
Yeah, and this is a problem with the regulatory state, Michael. They're the third party involved that imposes rules on two consensual parties, and then does not have to bear the consequences of that. The party that they're imposing the rules on does. So the Washington Post is forced to negotiate based on a union empowered by politicians. They have to engage in this arbitration process, and then they have to act against their own interests. Firing her was in their interests. I thought, they have the right to have standards that they judge people by. She may disagree with them. That's too bad. They're their standards, and they have a right to fire her based on those standards. I mean, Michael, I could talk about a particular promotion that I've been involved with that has chosen not to use me in their promotions because of because certain fans think I believe things that I'm actually appalled by, and they've just said it so often on social media that the promotion just either they believe it themselves, which is hard. It's hard for me to swallow because they've worked with me personally and know I'm not that kind of guy, or they're just afraid of blowback because these passionate miscreants, like to get on the promotions page and shit talk. But they've chosen not to use me, and that's their choice. I can't force them to do that. So here I am. I feel a victim of being maligned, but nonetheless going with the market and saying, well, I can't force them to take me. I have to go to other alternatives. It's wrong, what's happening, but it's also their choice and their choice to suffer the consequences from the market as well, if there are any. So I abide by this principle, even when I'm affected by it in a way that's not very positive for myself.
Yeah, Akira Felix says, who do you suppose supports those regulations more, leftists or right wingers? Well, in this regard, I would say it's definitely the leftists, because we're talking about this specific regulation. That doesn't mean that they're for more regulations overall. Even if you ever read The Conscience of a Conservative by Barry Goldwater, Barry Goldwater wants to go the the opposite route, but it's still government control. He wants to use antitrust laws to break up unions.
Sure.
Instead of saying, let's get rid of antitrust laws, which would be the correct position to take if you actually care about freedom. And he famously said extremism in defense of liberty is no vice. But if you really wanted to do that, then you would get rid of the antitrust laws. Because if you get rid of antitrust laws and you get rid of government enforcement of this stuff to force negotiations, then of course employees have the right to form a union and their employers have the right to send them on their way. That would be a free market.
I agree, and that's the ideal that we want to strive for. But it's a tacit admission on the part of Goldwater, and something that most unionists seem to not compute, that they are creating they're creating labor monopolies. And that's what they're doing. Even though they claim to be against monopolies in business, they are for monopolies in this respect. And that's why they have to be quote unquote immune from antitrust, because they are in fact colluding with each other to lock out competition. That's what they do. That's what unions are doing. And it's unfortunate, Michael. And a free market would be the solution to all of this. So there wouldn't be these kinds of conflicts if we had free markets, or they'd be easily resolvable. Go ahead.
By the way, you were watching the Capitalist Corner. We are on live weekdays, 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific, to talk about the issues of the day from a pro-reason, pro-capitalist perspective. The show is on the Rational Alternative YouTube channel. Please go and subscribe. We're 23 away from 1,000. So we're almost there.
Getting there.
And by the way, those who are watching, we could use your help. And those who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. We would love it to get to 1,000 soon. Ian, can you remind me of the book you recommend, or the article you recommended yesterday? I forgot the guy's name, about Austrian economics and objectivism. All right, Mark, take us to the next issue.
Yeah, so all right. So we all know, because we've been reporting on it here for a long time, that Trump is having quite a bit of difficulty in the Iran war. I guess he's, aside from the fact that he has no actual strategy, he's confronting a regime that seems to have an almost infinite capacity for suffering, which I don't think he banked on. And so and he's noticed that, while taking out the military targets that he's taking out and trying to degrade the IRGC's capacity to attack ships in the Straits of Hormuz isn't really doing much. And since he refuses to take out dual use infrastructure, he's decided upon another way, which I think he thinks will be a little bit more hands-off and give him a little bit more latitude in the upcoming midterms. And that is to sanction Iran. But not only Iran, but any nation that chooses to do business with Iran. Now, let's set the atmosphere here a little bit, Michael, because Trump has chosen to go to war with pretty much every country out there, including our own allies, and he's using tariffs as a stick to try to cudgel our ally nations into submission to do what he wants to do. So he's already got a hostile group of allies, not inclined to listen to what he wants, and now he wants to leverage the American dollar even more and the American economic might even more to cow, the 60 or so countries, I think, that somehow exchange with Iran, by threatening them with sanctions as well. Now, the main trader with Iran is China, and they get 80 to 90% of their oil from Iran. The question is China going to honor this? And if this sanction, and if they are not, what is America going to do about it? I think this is, This is just more insanity for me, Michael. But tell me what you think of this.
It's just, it seems, well, it doesn't seem, it's just threats. And from coming from somebody who's shown that he very frequently doesn't follow through on his threats, I don't see it going anywhere. Yesterday, because there was actually the Speaker of the Parliament gave a speech where he talked about how the Iranians are suffering, the economy sucks, and that unless that turns around, just military might won't save them. So I thought, well, it's possible then these sanctions might help. But then I find out that it's Trump not putting sanctions, but threatening sanctions. And then it's threatening countries that do business with them. But all the while, he's doing things like putting tariffs on Canada and getting into a trade war with Canada. It just doesn't make sense to me in a time when you need allies to be alienating people.
It's the 1920s all over again, Michael, because he's using parts of the Smoot-Hawley tariff, which Hoover used to institute protective tariffs in the United States.
No, Mark.
No, he wasn't. I thought he was using parts of the Smoot-Hawley tariff.
The Smoot-Hawley tariff, I believe, was 32. It was passed, or 30. Let me find out exactly when the Smoot-Hawley tariff was passed here.
So anyway, these were tariffs that I thought Hoover instituted in an attempt to preserve.
Hoover left
American
office in
agriculture.
33, Mark.
But I thought he passed the Smoot-Hawley tariff. Somebody.
Yeah, he
clear that
did.
up
He
for us.
did. It just wasn't in the 20s. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You said in the 20s.
Oh, I'm saying, well, I meant it's the 20s and 30s all over again. I mean the whole era of the 20s.
All right.
and 30s.
Well, the Smoot-Hawley tariff was
Meaning-
passed in 1930.
Yeah, meaning when we were in the Depression, and also rampant statism and fascism and communism were all coming to a head in competition with one another. And the president at the time thought that protectionist legislation was the answer to the Depression at the time, and it certainly was not. And so he's using that tariff to impose more tariffs on Canada, which has inspired another trade war at a time, Michael, when we're $40 trillion in debt, at a time when the tariffs are already imposing $1,000 on each citizen, expenses on each citizen, $8,500 to build a new home, all because of capital goods and goods that we need to build infrastructure are the costs are rising because of these tariffs. They are ultimately paid by the American citizen. And I think in a time of economic crisis, which we are certainly in and heading towards with a $40 trillion debt, the chickens
Did you
are.
see this? Did you see this? Bonnie posted. I saw this morning. Trump put a post on Truth Social.
I did. Lake Ontario shall be called Lake America because he doesn't like Canada. Nothing makes sense. I mean, it's Michael. It's like we're dealing with a perpetual high schooler in there.
High school? You give him that much credit?
All right, middle school, grammar school,
maybe even elementary. Maybe, yeah, maybe a little.
Yeah,
lower.
Perhaps he's that emotionally young, and let's hope any of these decisions can be reversed in the next administration. Should there be another administration, Michael, we're paying $1 trillion just in interest on the debt alone, and there's no clear political will to start dealing with this problem.
Mark, do you think if Dems take the House in November, which I think there's a very good chance they will, do you think they'd have the guts to defund the war in Iran?
I think they would have the guts to do that, but I don't think they would have. They certainly don't have the guts to deal with what it causes 3/4 of the debt, which is all those entitlements. They won't touch that, but they could defund.
So Megan's here. Megan, you got to let me know if you ever downloaded the Francesco Reddy video, because I got to get it off my system. So let me know, Megan, please. Okay, Megan is awesome, by the way. I'm not trying to be mean, but I did want to read this to Mark because I thought it was funny. This was from the Free Press this morning. In Alaska, Dan Sullivan has endorsed Dan Sullivan against Dan Sullivan. Last week, former Anchorage Mayor Dan A. Sullivan backed incumbent GOP Senator Dan S. Sullivan over retired teacher Dan J. Sullivan, whom Republicans accuse of being a Democratic plant to confuse voters.
I almost believe anything at this point, Michael.
All right. Oh, I got to read the question from yesterday. I asked
what
about
was
the
the
rule of
question?
law. Well, if you were here, you'd know. But of course, you go gallivanting with all your good time Hollywood pals.
Hardly. I was auditioning for a TV show, Michael, an American TV show that
Like I
shoots.
said, gallivanting with your
Wait,
Hollywood pals.
no, but guess where it shoots?
Vancouver.
No, Madrid.
Oh, Spain.
I did a show one time called The Philanthropist. It was supposed to be in Chicago. Guess where they shot? Not Chicago. It was supposed to be in San Diego. And guess where they
Listen,
shot
dude,
it?
I'll tell you what. You're not going to drag me to California and then take off to Spain. I know. I
No,
know that.
no. Listen, guess where this show that was supposed to be shot in San Diego. Guess where it shot?
Madrid. You just told us.
No, no. This is another show. This is a show I did like 10 years ago, 15
Oh,
years ago.
where?
South Africa.
Nice. No, not Pittsburgh. But Ian, it'd be nice to see you in Pittsburgh at the convention. I just saw it posted to Facebook, the schedule. Anyways, the question had to do with the rule of law. So Greg Lewis says, in a free society, should laws be created prescriptively or descriptively? If an error is discovered in a law, do obstacles encountered in trying to remedy it bear witness to the degree of freedom said society possesses? So Greg asked a question, and Akira Felix says, should the rule of law be upheld in a society even if you disagree? He says, absolutely, regardless of how I personally feel about it. The Iran war is a great example of that. Also, by the way, yesterday I misspoke when I said that the Scousins founded Liberty Fest. It's actually called Freedom Fest. My error. My apologies. All right, Mark, it's up to you now. You're doing the everything.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, look, we advocate for a capitalist society, and we keep defining that multiple times for everybody because we want to get this message across to people that capitalism essentially is a system wherein you have complete and total freedom with respect to your property and your person, and that you are free to associate with any consenting adult you choose to associate with and trade with, and the government can do nothing about those voluntary exchanges between you and others. The government's only purpose in a capitalist society is to protect your right to life, your right to liberty, and your right to the pursuit of happiness, and to protect your inviolable right to property. That means 98% of what the government does today should be gone. The $40 trillion debt, the overwhelming majority of it has been built up doing what the government should not do. And in a capitalist government, the representatives would be accountable to the people. They would not be able to overstep their bounds like they do now and overspend in order to gain constituencies. They wouldn't they wouldn't have constituencies that they could bribe by bringing the pork home to their state, because no such thing would be allowed in a constitutionally restrained government, which is what a capitalist society would have. So let's bring these ideas to the world, folks. Let's try to make them the dominant ideas in the culture. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel, and make sure you spread it across social media platforms, because these ideas of capitalism and individualism, they need to be the ones that dominate. So guys like El-Sayed can't get out there and bullshit people that he's actually a guy standing for free markets when he just really wants to take your stuff and give it to those he deems to be more worthy of it. And so my question, I guess, today is: do you think that these Democratic Socialists of America, especially a guy like El-Sayed, will win the general election? The conventional wisdom says they won't, but El-Sayed is pretty skillful at positioning himself as a guy who's really for not only the common man, but also sort of for markets. And he's not too bad at pointing out the hypocrisy of the right and deflecting attention back onto them. So do you think the DSA will win the state elections that they're up for? All right, so you have 23 hours to check your premises, folks. Please do that little thing. It's what all smart people do, and we'll see you here. Minds active, minds ready, ready to go. What does that say? You're on mute.
Help the American Capitalist Party get traction from Bonnie Bertrand. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, Bonnie. We'll see you here with your premises checked. All right, folks. Peace.